Today we'll be talking about music of Tchaikovsky, and I would like to start with a brief overview of his own training at the piano. As it was quite normal at the time, he started his piano education with his mom. But since his family moved quite a lot, his father was quite a high official in mining business, then his training became quite sporadic. And his family didn't think about young Peter as a musician. So at the age of 9, he started his education as a future lawyer. And for 10 years, 10 most important years in the development of any pianist, he didn't have any professional training. Obviously, there was a piano at the school, at the law school, but all the music activities there were mostly entertainment-like. Can you guess what note I'm playing? Can you play the piece if I cover the keyboard with a scarf? So something like that.
Oh.
And when Tchaikovsky decided to become a composer, and he became one of the very first students at the newly opened St. Petersburg Conservatory, he was excused from taking piano classes because he was so busy taking all the classes required for a composer. Composition, polyphony, instrumentations, everything that you can imagine. So he basically was an amateur pianist. That's why when he was writing a piece for a piano, he didn't have that specific feeling that a well-trained pianist has when you have an idea and you feel it under your fingers. So Tchaikovsky was primarily an orchestral composer, and he himself, even if he composed lots of music for the piano, he considered his effort in that direction as musical pancakes. That phrase appears more than once in his letters to different people, to friends. So I guess almost everything what he wrote for the piano could be called not piano pieces, but his own piano reductions of imaginary orchestral works. And it creates certain difficulties. So let's take a look at his barcarolle from the Seasons. First of all, look, it's probably the only barcarolle in piano literature that is not in 6/8. So on the page, it looks very light, it looks very transparent, and if we play just the harmonic structure of that, it's perfectly logical, beautiful suspensions, wonderful resolutions, very logical voice leading. But if you start playing everything the way it's written, this is where the difficulties begin. So immediately the second group, the second little phrase, presents that stretch between B flat and D. But here it's quite doable. But then Tchaikovsky just writes a sequence. He moves the same phrase down. And while he's going from white key to the black, if F, E flat, it's fine. It's not quite comfortable, but it's fine. But then next group, E flat to D, that stretch is almost impossible. So that's one of the evidence that he didn't have that natural feeling of the keyboard under his fingers. So the problems I will be talking about are the following. So first, I mentioned stretches, quite uncomfortable stretches. Because let's say Rachmaninoff music has a lot. And if your hands are small, it might be a problem. But overall, they're very comfortable. Then, unexpected leaps. Same thing. Liszt's music has lots of them. But they're quite comfortable to play if you practice hard. Then, orchestral thinking. And quite unusual use of polyphony. And the fifth difficulty I want to talk about stands a bit apart. Tchaikovsky's understanding of programmatic music. So here's the list of the problems, and I will use examples from 3 different cycles. Album for the Young, beginner level, The Seasons, intermediate level, and also one piece from his cycle Opus 72. that is quite advanced level. So we have a list of problems, we have a list of pieces, we need a student. I like that scary look in your eyes. So it will be an imaginary student. Please help me welcome Teresa. So that young lady will go with us through all three difficulties. At the beginning, she is about, what, 8, 9? And at the end, she will be 19 or 20 college level student. So we start with Album for the Young. As you see on your handouts on page 1, Tchaikovsky states after Schumann. So let me compare two albums, Schumann's and Tchaikovsky's. First, the size. Schumann's album is quite large. It's 43 pieces. Tchaikovsky's is 24. Schumann's is in 2 parts. Part 1 for younger ones, part 2 for older ones. And obviously the level of difficulty, Schumann starts with easier pieces and then progresses to more and more difficult ones. Tchaikovsky doesn't do that. His album is in one chunk, 24 pieces, and he didn't think about that as a method book. So the easiest piece, My Doll is Ill, that's the easiest one. It's actually in the middle. Then, in terms of organization, Schumann's album for the young is rather a collection. There is not too many connections between the pieces. It's not like that in Tchaikovsky's. Tchaikovsky starts his cycle with the morning prayer, and the last piece, or the second of the last, depending on what edition you use, is called In a Church. So in a way, Tchaikovsky's album for the young could be subtitled A Day in the Life of a Child, from the morning to the evening. And also there are many groups within that cycle. A group of Russian tunes, or then a group of pieces that we can call traveling, German song, French song, Italian song. But my favorite group could be called A Story About a Dollar. When Tchaikovsky presented the newly composed album for the young to his publisher, the order of pieces looked like this. And the reaction was, well, Petrovich, it's a bit depressing. Can we do something about that? Tchaikovsky was not in the mood to compose something else or to just cross it out altogether. So this is what he did. He just changed the order. And the whole story became completely different. So you see, Tchaikovsky's album for the young is a cycle. Now, closer to the business. Morning prayer. Well, obviously, all of us can see a typical hymnal kind of texture in that example. But when young Teresa first opens the score, she wouldn't think about that this way. She wouldn't think about that as a choral piece. The way she probably will be thinking might look like this. Dum, bum, 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 bum. I'm sure you know that. I'm sure you encountered something like that. So what can we do about that? Well, Tchaikovsky composed quite a lot of choral music. And I found a prayer in his liturgy. And I would like you to listen to a fragment of that Lord's Prayer. It's on page 2 of your event. Oh, forget that. student hears that long line, when she hears how the music, how the notes are being connected one to another, it would be much more easier to play as that horizontally. And also, in the choral texture, it's very clear how the bass and the melody dominate the texture. Well, the first phrase is quite easy. The second one is much more difficult. Every time I taught this piece, the melody looked like that. Second. The obvious solution is to play it voice by voice, but also there is a wonderful connection between the bass line and the alto line. They go in parallel temps. So if Teresa hears that, it would be much more difficult for her to play it. But if she still does that, well, that's the time for the golden rule. What is longer must be stronger. So you see, D is a dotted quarter. So it obviously must be stronger than the next C. There is one more difficult, not exactly difficult, interesting passage in that piece at the end. With an echo, one octave lower. It's not exactly choral, it's rather orchestral. So we will talk about that a bit later. But for now, if Teresa worked hard enough, this is what she probably could end up with.